I've got about 35 follow-up questions to what you just said. But you mentioned, for instance, the strategy was wrong. This was mishandled, that they didn't do the diplomacy right. One thing after another you just went through that was mishandled. How could so many important things be so mishandled?
I think it begins with not wanting to see things as they were. When the insurgency started and we all started to say, look at this, what are we going to do? The decision was made at that time not to have additional troops sent in, and in fact the troop flow was stopped. When we could have had more troops, we stopped flowing troops.
Were you in favor of more troops at the beginning? A lot of more troops?
Yeah.
Were you in favor of the Powell Doctrine, which would have been to send enough troops in there to win the thing?
I'm always in favor of the Powell Doctrine. The Powell Doctrine doesn't exist in any military document. It's something that was ascribed to me by a reporter, of all things, but nevertheless, it essentially, I'll take it.
So it had to be.
Right. It makes it even more powerful. It was in the Washington Post, not the military manual. But it essentially says, choose your political objective carefully. Use all the tools available to you, economic, diplomatic, political, and as a last resort, use military. Because we're putting young American lives at risk and young lives on the other side as well. And when you decide you have to use military force, then do it in a way that is decisive, that you are sure of the outcome and you have anticipated what could happen that might require force. And we had this debate. General Franks and I discussed it, even though I was no longer on the defense side of it. I was the Secretary of State, but I called Tommy Franks as a fellow general, and we talked about it, and he was comfortable with the troop level, and we then argued it out in front of the President, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General Franks, and the other military leaders were satisfied with the troop level. And on the 9th of April, it looked like they were exactly right, because the regime had collapsed, Baghdad was ours, and then the circumstances that hadn't been planned for began to occur.
As a practical matter, I know you hate these kinds of questions, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. It's a what-if question. If the Powell Doctrine had been followed, forget Powell Doctrine, let's say 500,000 troops had been sent in there, and the plan was, the advanced planning had been done with the knowledge that, hey, this thing might fall apart if we're not careful. Let's send 500,000 troops in there. Would we be talking about a different situation today?
It'd be a different situation, but I'm not a fortune teller, and I can't say that everything would have been solved. But when we became the liberator of Iraq and the Iraqi people on the 9th of April, we also became the occupier. We became the government, and we were responsible for imposing order on that society. And that society started to shatter because we had broken civil structure. The military was dissipated at that time and then disbanded improperly, in my judgment. And the whole civil service went away. So there was no civil society, there was no governing structure. And it was our responsibility at that point to become the governing structure. And we did not have that as a political, as part of our political plan, political will to do that. And we did not plan well enough for that. And we did not have enough troops to impose order. And the troops that were there were not clear whether they were supposed to start shooting people, for example, who were burning down ministries. That was a time when you needed to be rough, when you needed to impose order, you need to impose martial law, everybody into your homes until we sort this out. And that didn't happen. And then as ministries started to be burned down, the very ministries we were planning to use to reconstitute an Iraqi structure. And we did not respond in a proper way, in my judgment.